From Finland, where you feel the cold weather but a warm welcome, and from a historical capital that gathered last summer as a neutral land, the two poles of the world, and a summit where the two Russian and American presidents met for the first time outside international summits and conferences. From Helsinki, I salute you in another episode from Bila Hudud Show, in which I host His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Finland, Timo Soini. Why did his country suspend the sales of arms to the UAE and the KSA? Why did he describe the Middle Eastern political situation as very complicated? What message does he convey to the Arab peoples whose spring has failed? What is the role of Finland in the Baltics that has turned into a place of confrontation between Russia and the West? Which Europe is he looking for in the shadow of the neo-Nazism, and what is the fate of the EU in the light of disagreements on migration and financial rescue packages? Welcome, Your Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Finland, Mr. Timo Soini, and thank you for granting us this interview. You have suspended the sales of arms to the UAE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Why?
Finland is very precautious what comes to arms in general, and we are transparent and a rule of law country, and we are considering very carefully when we are selling the arms. There is that kind of system in our country that both Foreign Minister and Minister for Defense is making evaluation about the situation in a general, also human rights perspective, and we decided a few weeks ago that we will cut off the new deals what comes to Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, but we are fulfilling our old commitments and deals done before this time.
Why didn't you do like Germany that suspended everything, even old licenses and contracts?
This is because Finland respects the deals done, and that is our policy, long-term policy, which I think is also sustainable to our partners. And when the situation, considering our point of view, has changed, then we make that change that onwards where we have evaluated. So that is why that we don't want to cancel the old deals which are evaluated on that kind of situation which was taking place before.
However, is your respect of the contracts and fulfillment of contracts is more important than respecting human rights?
No, it's not. Of course, human rights are always very, very important, and we respect them, and that is why we make a new evaluation. But also, when we are making deals, it's very important for the Finns that deals are respected and things are carried out the proper way. And if we can, if we then make a reconsideration, we can change that thinking. But this is the evaluation we have now carried out, and this is how we are going to go forward from this onwards.
However, while you're talking to us right now, the arms, the weapons that you have already sold to the alliance led by Saudi Arabia and Yemen are still being used to kill civilians and children in Yemen until now.
Actually, we are not providing even currently the kind of arms which are used for killings. There are different kinds of equipment we are selling, and this is not the material which is directly can be used in that way.
Even if we were considering them to be tanks, there is a Finnish tank used by the UAE on which they put, I think, Russian missiles. And there was bombing through this equipment that you had produced, manufactured.
There is no clear evidence. There is rumors that whether it was a Finnish produced vehicle or not. But we are not selling that kind of vehicles with the arms arms. And if somebody then put arms to our vehicles, it's of course a very serious thing. But we are not selling that kind of packages. We only sell vehicles.
So why did you stop the sales if it's not harming them directly?
Because we are reconsidering the situation now onwards, and we want to be sure whether this what is the situation, and that is why we are not taking any risk now. But it's very easy to be wise now and then think about what the situation was years ago when the vehicles were sold. This kind of situation wasn't at stake, and of course now when situation is different, we would be reconsidering. But it's very easy in the world to say that now I would do the other thing and then I did the other thing. But in the world it doesn't function like this.
So how can you assess the humanitarian situation in Yemen right now, even if in parallel there are talks taking place in Stockholm?
I'm very happy that my dear colleague Margot Wallström is hosting the talks in Sweden, and I'm urging and encouraging all the parts participating in the negotiations. And I'm very glad that this situation is now very topical, and because the situation in Yemen is horrendous. The civilians, women, children are suffering. Thousands of people has been killed, and of course now international community and also the regional parts must work together in order to get a ceasefire, in order to guarantee that the aid will be delivered to the suffering people, and then the peaceful solution can be obtained. Because we must understand there is no military solution which can be sustainable on this situation. I know that the situation is very fragile, but I want to encourage all the way to take parts of these negotiations in Stockholm, all the international community and all the parts who are involved and regional actors also to be helpful on this.
The war in Yemen has gone on for almost 4 years today, and there were a lot of massacres against civilians. Why did you choose this timing in particular in order to suspend the sales of arms to UAE and KSA? Because of the conflict in Yemen, as you said, was the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi a motivation for you to take this decision?
I think that the international community has failed on dealing with this conflict, and I think personally that it is shame for all the mankind, and it is shame for all us human beings that this conflict has been ongoing so long time. And in a way, this horrendous murder of Khashoggi opened the kind of chance of window to do something, and in that sense it is good that this initiative has now been grabbed by the Swedes and backed by the international community. It is true that Mr. Griffiths has been very active in the area, and he has been trying to do and obtain the chances, but there hasn't been political will also in the area. And now when there is this time window, I think that we must go further. But the clear fact is that the whole world and also United Nations and especially the Security Council of United Nations hasn't been awake enough, hasn't been active enough, hasn't been, how do I say, profitable enough to create the chance. But now when we have it, we must grab it, and I hope sincerely that we don't miss this opportunity, because thousands of lives has been lost, and there is our international responsibility on this towards the people in Yemen and also in the region.
So it's an international responsibility towards the people in Yemen, and what highlighted it more was Mr. Khashoggi, who's the late Khashoggi. How can you assess the way the international community dealt with the killing of a journalist as a crime? Here, I'd like to note that Finland is always on top of the list of Reporters Without Borders of the countries that respect freedom of speech.
Yeah, it's of course it's very unfortunate if we have to witness this kind of losing of life of journalists in order to get time window open. And of course, it's very important for all of us throughout the globe, whether country we are coming from, that there is a freedom of speech, reporters can do their job and tell us people what is happening, what is the background of it and everything else. And the problem has been also with this conflict that it hasn't raised interest enough in the international community. We know that suffering has been there, but we have, as an international community, neglected the cry of the women and the children. That is the poor fact. And now when there is this time window, also partly because of this murder of Khashoggi, that has raised in a way the opportunity to do something. And of course we should also do our utmost best without this kind of sacrifices, and it shouldn't be dependent on this. But now when it happened and we cannot get him back anymore, but if we can get something out of the situation to help Yemenis people, so let's do it.
And what will you do, since you are a country of free journalism, to protect journalists based on what happened to Khashoggi?
We have, of course, called full investigation what has happened, and we are supporting all the time, also in the international organization and level. We are taking stands, we are speaking for it, and we try also in our own country practice what we preach, so that in this country politicians are quite heavily criticized, and I think it is just because the transparency of democracy and so forth, and when you are having a position which is very high and you have power, then you must be transparent, and your things and your sayings and your actions must be challenged. But also then politicians can have a fair say what are they doing and what are they delivering. I think on the longer run it's also best for the people in power that they are under scrutiny in a way that they know that my actions has to be in a way executed that way that I am considered to be accountable.
What are the practical and tangible measures taken by Finland regarding the Khashoggi issue, which has become an international issue of interest to the whole world? Because without journalism, you cannot highlight a crisis, a hardship like Yemen. What are those measures? For example, Germany banned the travel of 18 Saudi officials who are responsible for killing Khashoggi and the Istanbul consulate. Did you do the same? Did you ban them?
Of course, Finland functions very actively in the multilateral organizations throughout the world, whether it is United Nations, OSCE, or European Union, or all kind of organization connected to freedom of speech. And this is our message wholeheartedly. And of course, then if we find out that there are some people responsible of this horrendous murder, then we of course are putting sanctions on them. But this is a rule of law country in Finland, that first you must press the charges and then you must have a conviction. We cannot judge anybody without kind of a proper trial.
However, these are figures against whom sanctions were issued according to the Magnitsky Law in the United States. They were banned from traveling to the United States, and the same for Germany
Yeah.
and Schengen countries. Why didn't Finland yet take such a measure, such a step? What are you waiting for, especially that the Saudi public prosecution itself said that these people are involved in the killing?
Yeah, of course, we are following the way we have been acting in this country, and of course, when we get time and information enough, we can then make second thoughts, and then we can carry on this line. But the Finnish way is usually being that there should be first evidence, and then the process has to be gone through. And this is usually what we go through, for example, the sanctions with Russia when they are acting improper way in Ukraine. For example, now there were 8 people put in on the sanction list because they arranged. Yeah.
I will mention Russia.
This is the Finnish way to do. Yeah.
Allow me, sir. Did you follow up on the way the Khashoggi issue has played out and what happened in the Congress regarding it?
Yeah, of course we are following this whole thing very carefully, and we are of course condemning wholeheartedly his killing, and we want to have a proper trial, transparent trial. We want those people who are in charge of this be convicted. But it's not up to the Finnish government to carry out, to be a judge on a trial. It's up to the Saudi government to deliver this. And of course we are supporting and demanding that this whole horrendous thing will be clarified. But it cannot be done from Helsinki.
Of course, yes. But what do you think about what President Trump has said, where he said maybe the Crown Prince knew, maybe he didn't? How did you understand that? Is he trying to protect the Crown Prince?
It's very hard for me to know. I just hope that the truth will come out. And my experience is in life is a kind of that truth is a very demanding phenomena. It will burst out someday anyway, even though you will dig out it to the earth. It will erupt anyway, and I encourage to tell whole truth, nothing but the truth, without hiding anything.
I understand your diplomatic answer. You said that the truth will be revealed at the end, knowing that Trump himself said we may never know what happened to Khashoggi specifically. Your intelligence, the Finnish intelligence, didn't listen to the very famous recording?
No, unfortunately, I haven't heard the recording, and of course, I'm interested to hear about it. If somebody would play it for me, I would gladly hear it. But of course, it's very hard on this position to be precise, but and say what did happen or what didn't if you didn't know. But we are urging to clarify the truth. The fact is that Mr. Khashoggi has been murdered, and we want those responsible to be convicted. That is our clear policy. And I think it would be the best thing happening also on the long run to all the people also in the area and also in the world. Because if you don't tell the truth, all kind of rumors, all kind of false information will prevail, and that is not good.
But what if the truth was like a scandal?
Then it will wipe out some very powerful people from the power.
What do you mean by that?
That is, if the truth comes out and some people are involved who are in the very high places, I think that then they are considered to be responsible, and in the political system, usually if you are responsible, there are consequences to your position.
So do you think this is possible?
Of course, this is how it functions here in Finland.
But Finland is the country of the free journalism. What about Saudi Arabia? What is it for journalism? What kind of countries?
Of course, it's not my judgment to say what kind of journalism is carried out in Saudi Arabia, but what we can say and what we can, in a way, encourage is that don't be afraid about press, because the press is for people to get the right information, and usually my experience has been, even though I have been also criticized sometimes very heavily, but if you get a chance to be fair, it's also a chance that you can be treated the fair way.
Is this the reason why you are rated as the top people or the happiest people by the United Nations?
Yeah. It's actually a very nice title that the Finnish people are said to be the most happiest in the world. When you look at our, how would I say, dark winter, it doesn't feel like so, but we are quite happy people in the attic of the world. We have our own troubles, but we try to cope and be honest and reliable, and we think that is the good way to live. It doesn't mean that we don't have difficulties. We do have, but the fair share of happiness for all of the people would be my present to all of us. So we don't have to possess this all by ourselves.
Anyway, Your Excellency, you said, look at our experience when you were visiting Cairo. And indeed, you have an experience in journalism that led you to being chosen as the happiest people in the world. So respecting freedom of the press doesn't contradict the political situation. How was your visit to Cairo, and why did you describe the Middle East back then as having a very complicated political situation with an impossible forecast?
Of course, the job of the foreign minister in every country is a challenging one, and when I go and visit the neighborhood in the Middle East, I know the situation is very complicated indeed in many parts, and it is not up to me to come and give only a pieces of advices. It's also for my job to get to understand why the situation is so complicated, why some of the prejudices are so deep rooted, and try to understand why the situation is the way it is. And this is one of the biggest, how would I say, challenges when I go over to the Middle East or whatever country in the area, to real understand, not just fly over and have an overlook and give judgments. Because if I don't understand the situation in the ground, the history of the conflict and the backgrounds of the conflict, it is a big risk that I would evaluate things the wrong way. And that is why I have been open to all my visits in the area to get information. And then I ask the questions, and then I make the suggestions to be helpful if possible.
I will know more from you about how you understand the Middle East after a short break, and then we will resume our interview with the Foreign Minister of Finland. Welcome once again to this episode of our show Bila Hudud with His Excellency, the Finnish Foreign Minister, Timo Soini. We would like to welcome you once again, Your Excellency. You had said that you only take positions after visiting the region. We were talking about the Middle East specifically. You visited Egypt, and we also spoke about free press. What happened to Giulio Regini? What does Finland think of it, knowing he's a European citizen?
Of course, when I go to the region, this is a great opportunity for me then to have a bilateral talk and also give our messages to the area. And of course, I visited Egypt as a minister. I have visited Egypt as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, and of course we are then discussing the topical issues, which the most important usually is the Middle East peace process, and this is something which worries us a lot, the relations between Palestinians, Israelis, and also the Egypt is very powerful factor in the region, and we hope to get results done in that sense. And always, irrespective of the country we are visiting, we are also talking about human rights, rule of law, and respect of human dignity. That goes to every country where we are visiting.
You insisted back then on the role of Egypt, as you mentioned, in ensuring a dialogue between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, its role in interfaith dialogue. But in a country where what happened to Giulio Regini, the European citizen, and in a country where everything that is happening to journalists is happening, including Mahmoud Hussein, our colleague in Al Jazeera. He was arrested while on vacation with his family just because he is a journalist. And you know that journalism is not a crime, and you're a country where your journalists are free. When such activities happen in a country, do you truly think that they can host an interfaith dialogue and hold dialogues here and there and play the role that you hope they will play?
Of course, we know that the freedom of speech is challenged in many countries and many regions in the world. And the Finnish, how would I say, phrase and the way to tackle the problem is usually that we are not going to be judges but doctors. And that is our approach to the situation. Bilaterally, we are talking very clearly also about human rights, freedom of press, and so forth. But also in the region, we know that we must build trust, and that means also to acknowledging and that we are living in the, how would I say, the world which is not perfect, and we know that we cannot go from abroad just to dictate what you should do and how you should do it. But we try to encourage everybody to get involved, and if we can be helpful in a way, enabling things, to be helpful in things, then I think this is the way to go forward, because we cannot pretend to ourselves that we can come from abroad and dictate the solution in a very complicated situation. But it's also that way that we just cannot sit here in the attic on the world and say that we are not doing anything because there are violations of human rights in the area. We just cannot have that kind of luxury that we are not going to be involved. This is what I try to say, that we know that a lot of bad things has happened on both sides. People have been assassinated, killed, murdered, and so forth.
Allow me here to use this interview for purposes that may be a little personal. How can you be helpful in the Mahmoud Hussein issue, the journalist of Al Jazeera who is arrested in the Egyptian prisons in very difficult situation all this time in an illegal way? Sorry for embarrassing you.
Yeah, of course, our message, not to particular government, what you now say Egypt, but all the governments in the world, including our own, is to be fair, to be just, to use the rule of law. Don't be afraid. This is a kind of universal approach of us. And of course, then if there is some particular person, which I don't know the case personally well enough to be judgmental on this, but our main approach is freedom of press, respect to journalism, respect this. But I don't want, on this occasion, point a certain person to a certain country, but overall approach to the freedom of press, freedom of information, and freedom of free speech.
Thank you for your answer to this question. Maybe it is outside the topics of this interview, but I wanted to ask it because Finland is known to be the country of the free press.
Yeah.
Now for Egypt as well. You spoke about the very important Egyptian role in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Now the parliaments of Europe are more encouraged to deal with greater justice with the Palestinian cause. What is the position of Finland vis-à-vis this cause? How can you perceive this Palestinian cause? Do you think it's a fair cause?
We think that on the longer run, the two-state solution is the sustainable one. And we, of course, want the Palestinians and the Israeli people live in peace, because both of those people has been suffering. There are murders, there are lives lost, and in very complicated conflict. The first thing I remember happening in my own life was 1973 war, when I was 11 years old. And this has been ongoing all my life, practically. And I have visited the area twice, also Palestine twice, and Israel twice, as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee and as a foreign minister. And I don't see any other way to go that to have a negotiations and get a deal accepted by both deals. But I would get a Nobel Prize straight away next year if I could say now what the deal would be. But I'm an idealistic in a way, and in many ways, and I just wanted that to be possible. That also in your region, also within those people, they can wake up to the day that they don't have to fear anymore that somebody is coming to kill them or persecute them or do anything bad to anybody. I know this may sound very idealistic, but if we don't even try, we have zero chance.
So this has to do with the Palestinian cause. Now for the Gulf crisis, the former Finnish president Matti Ahtisaari has also visited the Kuwait in an attempt to solve the Gulf crisis. Do you have any information about this issue, any role of Finland, even by a former president, to solve this Gulf crisis that impacted the whole region anyway?
I cannot enlighten you very much on this, but in general, the Gulf crisis, we know that it's not just the Gulf crisis, it's the crisis which has an effect to the whole world, in the Europe and also to Finland. And this is, of course, we know that all the parts should be moderate to try to understand that you cannot find and to get a hegemony in the area by force. This is my message, that you cannot win this kind of battles by force. You can win this kind of battles by better ideas, by providing better life, by providing better ideas, by providing a more sustainable way of life. If you try with arms, force and oppression, you will be caught in the end.
I don't understand from what you said, but that there is an attempt by a certain party to control the region with the force of arms and with unsuccessful and ineffective means. Are you here indicating the Saudi
Yeah.
role in the Gulf crisis, where Saudi Arabia wants to control Qatar, and this was considered or perceived as a big mistake, and then they entered a failed war in Yemen where they killed civilians, and then the Khashoggi case. Did I understand correctly that this is what you're indicating?
No, it's what I'm indicating is that also in your region there is a hegemony battle. For example, what comes, who is going to be a leader in the Islamic world, whether it is Saudi Arabia or Sunnah or Iran and Shia, or there are many other fractions who are competing with each other. This is what I mean, that there are different actors in the region who are involved in different, in a way, conflicts or proxy wars or waging certain kind of activities. And these are competing with each other. And there are other factors and other countries doing that as well. And my message is this, that mediation, cooperation, also economical integration and cooperation. That is the way to go forward. That is
Thank you
that
for
is what I
clarifying
meant.
this.
If you think that yeah, this is what I meant.
So it is an Iranian-Saudi competition that the peoples of the region are paying the price for. And amongst its results, the blockade against Qatar, the war against Yemen, the killing of Khashoggi also was considered to be a mistake by an error by the Saudi regime, as well as the kidnapping of the Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri. All this. So do you think that this has a certain solution?
Yeah, I think that no, I think very clearly what I want to say, that the murder of Mr. Khashoggi was a big mistake, and I think it is also a costly mistake. But what I also want to say, that there has been all kind of conflicts, all kind of funding of different kind of proxy wars or terrorism and in the region. And what I want to say, that I don't believe that they are not too many parts who are totally without any kind of sin, so to say, that there are not many countries who haven't been involved in some kind of bad activities throughout the years. But what I want to say, if you want to get rid of this kind of activities, you cannot find the military solution on this. The solution, what the people, I think, what I'm quite positive, in all the countries, the ordinary people, they want to have a job, they want to have an education, women want to have a say, children want to have a future, and they don't get it by funding a war. This is my message. And this is also that the message to the people who are having the power: you should represent your people. And to represent your people is to give them life opportunities. And of course the security is important. To tackle the terrorism, we all want to get rid of ISIS and that kind of terrorist activities. But when you are trying to get the rule of law system prevailed in the area, which is the only sustainable way to prosperity on the longer run, You cannot do it by funding wars. Because there is a saying that who takes the sword will go down with the sword. It's a matter of time.
You use the expression of a sin instead of mistake, and you said that whomever uses the sword falls with the sword. I see here your
Yeah, that
religious
is.
Catholic background here, and you say, I'm a perfectionist. You know that's going on in the Arab world. You've visited the region and you've spoken about the Saudi-Iranian competition, and you realize that the Arab Spring caused bloodshed and failed. What is your message to these Arab people whose spring has failed, especially this sectarian division that is taking place in the region right now, especially that you've always said that faith is personal but religion is not?
Yeah. Uh, of course, I think when I said about the sword, I think this is universal to all of us human beings, irrespective of whether we are Muslims, whether we are Christians, whether we are something else, or whether we are non-believers at all. But religion, I think, is very energetic, it's very powerful. And my message is that irrespective of your personal faith, I think you can use it either constructive way or deconstructive way. You can use it by urging peace and loving your fellow human being, or using for division and hate. And my option is to use your personal faith for doing good, not for doing bad. Whether you are Muslim, whether you are Christian, whether you believe or not.
We spoke a lot about the Arab world, and this is what's of interest to our public. But Finland is very important for the Baltics that has turned into a place of conflict between Russia and the West. The Russians are saying that you in Finland, even though you're not members of the NATO, but you have a phobia against Russia. Does this still exist? And how high was the price you paid due to the sanctions imposed by the Europeans on Russia because of Ukraine?
Yeah, of course, the illegal annexation of Crimea to Russia broke clearly international law, and that is what we don't accept in Finland. We don't accept that happening. And of course, the crisis in Ukraine has an effect to our region, especially in the Baltic Sea, security as well. And we were and we are part of the European Union, and we put sanctions on Russia because of this illegal annexation. And those sanctions has been prevailing now for a few years, and it's very likely also that the European Union is going to prolong the sanctions half a year, because the Minsk agreement hasn't been fulfilled, because the reasons why they were imposed are still there. But Finland is a neighbor of Russia, and we still think that we have to have dialogue. We are discussing with Russia on practical issues. We have a common border, which is very long one, 1,340 kilometers. We have very many practical daily basis things to be carried out with our neighbors. And we believe in dialogue. And we have been doing on that. But we can also be honest and fair. What we agree on, we can carry on. And what we disagree, we say it also aloud.
When you take hold of the European Council, Putin had said that he relies on you to improve the relations between Russia and the European Union. Is there any plan on this? Just briefly said, less than a minute.
Yeah, it's very hard. But for example, this Minsk agreement, which has been agreed on both sides, Ukraine and Russia, should be fulfilled, and we will be giving our utmost help. And also so-called Normandy group, which also consists France and Germany, will be active as well. And I hope that we will get solution sooner and later. It won't be easy.
So you believe that dialogue will be the solution in the relationship between Russia, the NATO, Russia and the European Union for the Nazism that re-emerged. Last week, the court solved what the so-called resistance of the North. Nazism is re-emerging. What is the solution?
It's of course I believe that even though we have difficulties with Russia and Europe and NATO and everything else, we must be positive on that, but we must be also fair. The situation is not good. It's bad. Relations are not good. But then we have these other challenges. What you said, and we want to tackle every kind of extreme thinking from our soul, whether it's with this hate to our fellow citizens or Nazism or whatever, that won't be tolerated in this area.
Is the issue of migration still represent a big disagreement in Europe? Yes or no?
Yes, it is. It is still very big thing, and that is why we need cooperation also regionally to get it tackled on a proper way.
Okay, and here I would like to end with this idea that in Lebanon, for example, which is 10,000 square kilometers with 5 million or even 6 million people, including more than 2 million refugees. Here you have around 5 million people with more than 300,000 square kilometers. I'd like to close with this idea, since I closed with a question on refugees and migrants. Thank you for your time. His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Finland, Mr. Timo Soini. Thank you so much, sir. Dear viewers, as such, we have come to the end of our program. Thank you for following us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.